Good day. A couple weeks ago, I showed you how you could get more flight time simply by calibrating your voltage and current meters in Betaflight. Today, I'm going to show you another way you can increase your flight time and at the same time capture smoother flight videos using another Betaflight application, Betaflight RPM filters. I'll show you how to set up Betaflight RPM filters for both BLHeli32 and BLHeliS ESCs because it's slightly different for each. If you're unsure of what type ESC you have, no worries. I'll show you how to figure that out too. As a bonus for you, everything I go through in this video, I've captured for you in this easy to follow, step-by-step graphical checklist that you can download for free in the video description below. It even has hyperlinks in it to take you to the tools you'll need to implement these Betaflight RPM filters. Sound good? Then give it a thumbs up below, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to your TMac FPV channel, your home for your journey to better FPV fun, flights, and racing stuff. These are the three main things you need to get RPM filtering on your quad. First, you need to make sure that you have Betaflight 4.1 or newer firmware flashed to your flight controller. Then you need to update your ESCs. This is a step most folks may be uncomfortable with because normally you're not updating your ESCs as often as you may update your Betaflight firmware. No worries though, because we'll step through this process together, and with the available checklist through the link below, it's actually quite simple. You just need to determine what type ESC firmware you have on your ESCs, either BLHeli32 or BLHeliS, and then based on that, use the right configurator to update your ESCs. If you have BLHeliS firmware, you have a couple choices for what configurator you use to do the updates. You don't use both, you use one or the other. JESC is a stable configurator which you can use for a very small fee, a few dollars, or you can use JazzMaverick firmware, which the Betaflight wiki says is a beta version you can try and use for free. I'll walk through this ESC update process for both BLHeli32 and BLHeliS firmware ESCs using all three options. Once we've updated our ESCs, the third and final step is the Betaflight Setup, which if you've ever done any Betaflight Setup on your quad, you won't have any issues with. If you've never done any Betaflight Setup on your quad, using the checklist below, you also shouldn't have any issues. So let's get started with our first step, making sure we have Betaflight 4.1 or newer firmware on our quadcopter. If you already know how to do this, feel free to use the hyperlinked table of contents below to jump to the next section. Let's go! Alright, the first thing we want to do anytime we're working on our quad inside and powering it up either through a LiPo battery or via connection to the computer through the USB cable, we want to make sure for safety reasons we've taken our props off the quadcopter. Very important to save your fingers. We also want to put our VTX in the lowest possible power setting, and if you have one available, grab a fan and get some air blowing on the flight stack. This will prevent your VTX and flight stack from overheating. Then we want to connect our quadcopter to the computer via the USB cable and power it on. Alright, now with our quadcopter connected to Betaflight and our Betaflight configurator opened, remember our first step is to ensure that we've got Betaflight 4.1 or newer flashed as our firmware on our flight controller. To do that, we're going to go to our CLI and we're going to type the words dump all and hit enter. And it will dump all of the information, all of the programming from the flight controller onto the screen. So we're going to scroll all the way up using the scroll bar, and we're going to look for the word version, and underneath this word version it will show you the version of firmware that you have installed on your flight controller currently. In my case, on my Rattler build, I've got Betaflight version 4.1.5 dated March 16th, 2020. We also want to take note that the target board name for this Rattler build is Omnibus F4FW. It's an Airbot Omnibus F4 flight controller with Betaflight 4.1.5 firmware installed on it. Since we want Betaflight 4.1 or newer, I've got that, so we're good to go. If this number is less than Betaflight 4.1, then you need to flash 4.1 or newer to your flight controller. If you're not sure how to do that, I'm not going to go through that in this video, but in the checklist that's available through the link below, I've added a link to another video that you can just click on in the checklist, which will bring you to a video demonstrating how to flash your flight controller with Betaflight 4.1 or newer. Next, we need to take a look at what type of ESC we have, either BLHeli32 or BLHeliS. Next, we want to find out what type ESC we have, BLHeli32 or BLHeliS. To do that, what I normally do is just Google my ESC and look at the ESC specs. So for my Rattler build, I know I'm using a Flywoo Goku ESC. So I just Googled Flywoo Goku, and it's a 40 amp ESC, and I find out here that it's a BLHeli32 ESC. That tells me that the configurator I want to use is a BLHeli32 configurator in order to update my ESCs. So we'll go ahead and update the ESCs using BLHeli32 configurator on my Rattler build first. Then, I know on my FlexRC 3-inch Kalugo build, I'm using the Mamba Mini flight stack, which includes the Mamba F25 ESC. That is a 4-in-1 BLHeliS ESC. So based on that, we can go ahead and update our ESCs for the FlexRC Kalugo with the BLHeliS firmware using the BLHeliS configurator and the JazzMaverick firmware to go along with that. And we'll also do the ESC updates with the JESC. So let's get started with the BLHeli32 configurator and the Rattler build. So first we need to download our BLHeli32 configurator, and to do that we go to this site, which I'll put the link to in the video description below, and it's also hyperlinked in the checklist, which is available down in the description below as well. Once we're at the site, we see there's different versions of BLHeli32 for different operating systems. We want BLHeli32 over here, so I'm going to download this. It's downloading over here to my download folder. I'm going to cut and paste that from my download folder to this folder I previously made, BLHeli32, paste it here, extract here, and then I'm going to launch the executable file. And now we've got BLHeli Suite 32 configurator up and running. Now I'm going to connect my quad to the computer through the USB. I'm going to select my COM port, hit connect, and now we're connected to the BLHeli Suite 32 configurator. I'm going to plug in a battery. And I'm going to click Read Setup. And here's my setup for all 4 ESCs. We see that we've already got Rev327 installed. That's because I've previously done this, but we're going to go through the process for demonstration purposes anyway. So here I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to select Flash BLHeli. And I select the latest Rev version. It needs to be 32.7 or above, so I'm going to select that. I verify that that is the latest version. I select OK, and then here I would go ahead and select Yes. And it's flashing ESC1 with Rev327. Yes. And it says ESC1 was flashed successfully to Rev327. I click OK, and then it's going to take me through each one of the ESCs. Bringing up ESC2, I would use the same process. Since I've already done this for all of my ESCs, I'm not going to go and show you the same process for all 4 ESCs. So at this point, I'm going to hit cancel, and all 4 of our ESCs are now flashed successfully with Rev32.7. So from here, we can click disconnect, take note of this, click OK. And exit out of our configurator. Now we've updated our BLHeli32 ESCs on our Rattler build. I'm going to demonstrate the same process of updating my BLHeliS ESCs on my 3-inch FlexRC Kalugo build using both of these options, the BLHeliS with the JazzMaverick firmware as well as with JESC. That way I will have demonstrated all 3 of these options for updating BLHeli32 and BLHeliS ESCs prior to us going to our last step, which is the Betaflight Setup, since this last step will be the same for all of them. The first option we'll do is the BLHeliS with the JazzMaverick firmware. So to do that, we need to download our BLHeli configurator by going to this site, which is available in a link in the video description below, and it's also hyperlinked in our checklist. Once here, we click on the appropriate version. In my case, it's BLHeli configurator Win64, and it downloads over here, which I'll cut and paste into a folder which I've previously made on my computer's hard drive. Paste. Right click, extract here. I can now delete this. Double click on that, and I want to click on the application. And now we've got our BlHeli configurator installed and ready for our quadcopter. Now we connect the quad to the computer, and it automatically goes to the correct COM port because it's been detected. We click connect, comes up with our safety warning, make sure the props are off, which they are. We need to connect power to the ESCs through the LiPo. And we're going to read setup. And here are all of our ESCs. We need to confirm the type of the ESC, whether it's an H type or an L type. Here you see that we've got H, this middle letter designation. And once that we've identified this as H, then we can go to our JazzMaverick site, which is available through a link in the video description below, or once again hyperlinked in the checklist. So let's go ahead and do that. And here's our JazzMaverick site. From here, we need to get the latest or the most recent hex files release version number. So the latest here is 16.8. We click on that. Since we've already identified that we have H type, not the L type, then we're not going to click on the L's. And we're going to start with the 24K version. So we're going to click on this. We have CH30. So we go down to CH3024. CH3024 Rev 16.8. And we're going to click on this. And this mess comes up, and we right click on this word raw. And then we're going to save the link as, and I'm going to save it to a folder which I previously made on my hard drive. So I'm just going to save this as a hex file to this folder. Click save. And once that has been saved, we go back to our configurator, and then we select flash all down here. We note that it's CH30, and we want to select our file manually, and we go to the folder where we placed it and click open. And here you see it's automatically flashing the ESCs. One at a time. You'll notice it was updated to 16.8 from 16.7, as was this one. So now all four of our ESCs have been updated from 16.7 to 16.8 successfully. That's a good thing. And we're at the same point now with our BLHeliS ESCs on our FlexRC Kalugo 3-inch build that we are with our BLHeli32 ESCs on our Rattler build. Once these ESCs have been flashed successfully, we can click disconnect and close out our BlHeli configurator. Next, we'll do the same process using our second option of using the JESC configurator to update our BLHeliS ESCs. In order to do our update using the JESC configurator, first we need to obviously download and install it. And to do that, we go to this site, which once again is available through the link in the video description below and is hyperlinked in our checklist. The download and installation process is the same as the previous two which we did. So once we're at the site, we select the version that we want to go with. In my case, I'm on Win64, so I click on that. It downloads over here, similar to what we did with downloading BlHeli configurator for the JazzMaverick firmware. Once this file is finished downloading, I'll cut and paste it to a folder which I've made previously on my computer hard drive. So I've made the JESC configurator folder here. I'm going to paste the zip file, extract here, delete the zip file, double click there, and I'm going to click on the JESC configurator application. And now we've got our JESC configurator downloaded and installed and ready to go. Now with our JESC configurator installed, we connect the quadcopter to the computer, just as we did before through the USB cable. It automatically detects COM3, and we connect. Then just as we did previously, we plug the LiPo into our quadcopter and click Read Setup. And since we just updated these BLHeliS ESCs with BlHeliS configurator and the JazzMaverick firmware, it's showing that our ESCs are CH30 with 16.8. However, I'm going to go through this process of using the JESC configurator to update these ESCs for demonstration purposes. We take note of the type of ESC. It is a type H, CH30, and we also see here that it's unlicensed. So to get the right JESC firmware for these ESCs, we need to go to the jflight.net site, the JFlight store, and down here I'm going to purchase JESC firmware ×4 for my 4-in-1 ESC, and we just make this purchase just like you would any other online purchase. Now that we've purchased our license, we can go ahead and select License All. And now we see that they're all licensed. And this warning comes up saying they're licensed, but we haven't yet activated them. So we need to flash JESC first using Flash All, and then afterwards flash telemetry service using Flash All Telemetry. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. They're showing licensed, and then we're going to select Flash All. And we want the latest version of D-Shot for our H type. So we're going to select JESC 2.3 for our H version ESCs at 24K, which is what's recommended for 3 inches and up. And that's what we're using here, our 3-inch FlexRC Colugo. You'll also notice that JESC's got them for L type ESCs as well. We're going to select 2.3 H 24K, and then we're going to select Flash. And you'll see it automatically starts flashing ESC 1, and then ESC 2. And this one went from licensed to activated licensed. Don't worry about these reversed, normal, reversed. That's how I set my motors up for my particular build. ESC 2 is now activated. Now remember, there's a note up here in this big bright pink bar. Don't forget, for Flash the telemetry service, using Flash All Telemetry to enable bidirectional D-Shot for RPM filtering. So we're not done yet. We need to, our ESC 3 flash failed. We need to flash that firmware. And now it's successful and activated license. It's a good thing I noticed that. Remember, we need to flash all telemetry. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And we choose D-Shot Telemetry Service 2.3, which is required for JESC 2.3, and select Flash. I'm going to write Setup. And now we're at the same point, having updated our 4-in-1 ESC on our FlexRC Colugo using the JESC configurator, that we are with having updated it with the JazzMaverick firmware and BLHeliS configurator, as well as updating our ESC on our Rattler build using the BlHeli32 configurator. So I've just demonstrated updating ESCs using BlHeli32 firmware as well as BLHeliS firmware, and the two options with BLHeliS, JazzMaverick and JESC. Now we go to our third step, which is our Betaflight Setup. All right, now we're ready to do step 3, our final step, which is Betaflight Setup. This step is going to be the same for both quadcopters, my Rattler build with the BLHeli32 ESCs, as well as my Colugo build with the BLHeliS ESCs. So we're only going to do this once. Before we begin our Betaflight Setup, we need to determine the number of magnets on our motors. To do that, you can either count them or look them up online. For my Rattler build, using the T-Motor 1507 3800 kV motors, we take a look here, go down to specs, and we see the configuration is 12N14P. This number here, 14, is the number of magnets on the motor. That's the number we're going to need in our Betaflight setup. You can actually count them. Starting here, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and there's probably 12 and 13 underneath there, which you would find by rotating your motor if you wanted to count them physically on your particular build. Now that's for the T-Motor F1507 on my Rattler build, 14 magnets. If we go to the motors that I'm using on my Colugo build, which are the Airblade Superman 1404 motors, you see the magnets down here. By the way, these Airblade Superman are really efficient, quiet motors. They're the most efficient and quiet motors that I've experienced myself, and they've recently come out, Airblade's recently come out with 1606 motors in the Superman series. You can get those motors through airbladeuav.com. I've got an affiliate link down below for Airblade if you'd like to use that at no additional cost to you. Helps me out. I've got affiliate links down there. That will definitely help out the TMac FPV channel and help support future video production for your benefit. In any case, these Airblade Superman motors are very efficient and very quiet. We're looking for the number of magnets on these. Here you see the configuration for these is 9N12P. So we've got 12 magnets here. And once again, if you wanted to, you could count them. starting over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Once again, if you wanted to do that physically on your own motor, you could rotate it and count them that way. You need to know the number of magnets because that number we'll need for our Betaflight setup. All right, now that we've got our number of magnets, we connect our quadcopter to the computer through the USB cable and open up our Betaflight Configurator version 10.6 or newer. It automatically connects, and we go to the Configuration tab, and those number of magnets that we just were able to identify on our motors. I've got my FlexRC Colugo with the 1404 Airblade motors on them, and that number was 12. So let's go ahead and put that number in here now before we forget. Motor poles, number of magnets on the motor bell, put in 12. We're also going to do our gyro update and PID loop frequency at 4K. We're going to set our ESC motor protocol to D-Shot 300, and we're going to toggle on bidirectional D-Shot. Save and reboot. All right, from here we then go to our Motors tab. With our props off and with our LiPo connected to our quadcopter, we toggle on I understand the risks. And then we're going to move this master lever up slightly, and we're going to take a look at this error number. You can hover your mouse cursor over it and it'll explain what it is. And we want this number to be 1% or less. The closer to 0, the better. If it's outside of that range, if it's more than 1%, then don't fly the quad because there's something wrong with it, which you got to figure out, and everything is figure-outable. So let's toggle this up, and you see the RPMs are going up for each of the motors, and the error rate of each of these motors is right at 0%, which is where we want it to be. So we're good to go. Next, we want to go to our PID tuning tab and click on filter settings, toggle on the gyro RPM filter, and per the Betaflight wiki on GitHub, we're going to set the dynamic notch filter to medium. We're going to set the dynamic notch width percent to 0. We're going to set this dynamic notch Q to 200, and then we're going to set this dynamic notch min to 150. And then we're going to hit save. Now, you can play with these numbers if you go to the Betaflight wiki on GitHub, and the link to that will be in the video description below, as well as it is hyperlinked in the checklist, which is available through the link in the video description below. If you go there, you can see more detailed descriptions on how you can play with these values, or as well as the gyro and D-term filter multipliers up here. They recommend you move them together. But that's all going to be based on how your quad flies with these initial setups to begin with. We want to make sure and click save. And then we want to fly the quad and listen carefully to the motor sounds. Make sure the motors sound good, and that after a short flight, we want to check out the motor's temperatures by touching them with our fingers. And if they feel cool or slightly warm, we may be able to refine our filter settings that we just spoke about to reduce filter delay or latency by reducing or removing some of the other filters in Betaflight. Once again, I'll refer you to the Betaflight wiki on GitHub for how to do that. But this is the basic setup. We're good to go. And now we've got Betaflight RPM filtering set up on my 3-inch FlexRC Colugo. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing after this video on my Rattler build. So that's how to set up Betaflight RPM filtering for both BLHeli32 and BLHeliS ESCs, which should give you smoother flights, resulting in smoother videos, and could actually give you longer flight times. There's nothing to be anxious about regarding the setup. 3 main steps with a detailed checklist below. If I could do this, you can too. Let me know in the comments below if you plan on setting up these Betaflight RPM filters on your quad. Thanks for your time. I'll see you next video. Clear skies, friend.